And I think on the way out of this, the restaurant industry needs stimulation like we've never seen before, because this is akin to the impacts of the Great Depression. Without JobKeeper, I'd say the vast majority of restaurants in Australia are trading insolvent as we speak, and it's got the potential to play it in a really ugly way.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. The COVID-19 pandemic delivered a devastating body blow to the Australian hospitality sector. Many people in Season 1 spoke of the fear and difficulties that may lay ahead in reopening with restrictions in place. Some believe that the reality of the financial situation for most restaurants in Australia is dire, and the next year is expected to be difficult to navigate. Is the problem way bigger than most people understand? Nino Zoccali is one of Australia's most successful restaurateurs. With the Restaurant Pendolino and La Rosa in the heart of Sydney CBD, he believes the next year will test the resolve of everyone in the industry. Nino, how are you?
Oh, I'm not bad, Anthony. All things considered, I'm not bad.
Look, the reason I wanted to talk to you for the first episode of Season 2 is that, in a way, this kind of started with you. I penned an article about the fall of the restaurant industry because of this pandemic, and the first person I thought of to speak to was you. And there's many reasons why that was, but you're one of the great restaurateurs in Australia, and you've got quite a brain on you that sort of analyses all aspects of the industry, and you've always got interesting things to say. And I guess with the stages that have been announced, stage 1, 2 and 3 for a reopening of society, I guess I just wanted to see how you're feeling right now about your business and what the landscape looks like.
Well, I mean, it's kind of a really broad, it's a direct question, but there's a very broad answer to that, and it depends where you really sit inside of the restaurant sector. There's so much to talk about on this, really. It's because it really depends. I think you can make some general comments like restaurants that were exposed to sort of takeaway, to a decent takeaway component already inside of their models have probably been able to, really, I hate the word pivot because it just makes me feel sick every time I hear it, because that's all we seem to be doing for the past six to 8 weeks. But it's like, but the truth is, if you were sort of exposed to takeaway in a significant way, you probably fared reasonably well. Even restaurants that are positioned to do takeaway pretty quickly, from the feedback I get, it's been not too bad, sort of quoting, 50% decline, 40% decline, some businesses even growing, which is really interesting. I guess the higher up the food chain you go in terms of the restaurant sector, the more, by virtue of the nature of the operation, you're not really set up for takeaway or known for that. That's not to say that sort of some of the more higher end restaurants haven't done that successfully. But so, yeah, I mean, with our restaurants, they're at the top of the centre of the, Strand Arcade in the centre of the CBD of Sydney. So not easy for us to do takeaway. The delivery models they're challenging at the best of times. That's a topic for another discussion, but the margin that they take, the traditional platforms, is really, really high, which means if you're not doing takeaway as part of a takeaway or delivery service, it gets challenging. I think what's happened has really impacted a lot of restaurants' businesses in very different ways, and those that were most able to really ramp up the takeaway thing seem to be the ones that have really have been able to navigate this the best. For us, really, really difficult. We're going to launch a delivery service, and we're using 2 alternative platforms to do that. So one which is really like the purchasing platform, and then the second is a delivery a delivery model that's different again. They just do the delivery. So I guess there's been a lot of shaking up of the whole delivery space at the moment because of the massive increase in demand. And then there's a range of different things that people can have done to try and, I mean, the bottom line is with this stuff, the industry in Australia, the restaurant industry, is, I don't know, floats between, 4 or 5% profitability to the low single digits at different times. And it's a really an industry with really, really tight margins if you look at the industry as a whole. And if you can't just taking 10%, 15, 20% revenue out of most of those models, it can be catastrophic. My analysis over the years would be that, a 1% decline in revenue leads to a 3% decline in your bottom line, which means most businesses are in serious trouble at a 25 to 30% decline in revenue. You take out 80, 85, 90, 95, 100% of the situation, and it gets really, really tricky. And the longer this goes on, the more tricky it gets. But basically, even with JobKeeper, unless you're doing a lot of takeaway or being able to pivot to like a serious alternative revenue stream, you're in big trouble. And if you don't have deep pockets, aka cash reserves, and it's just a matter of time before you're going to go broke. And I'm not sure, well, actually, I'm pretty sure that most people in Australia that have no close association with the restaurant industry have any idea of how severe it is, because we are, along with probably tourism, we're another aviation sector. If you really haven't got an ability to be have a high takeaway component party model, or being able to sell groceries somehow en masse.
I want to get to a discussion about restaurant models and how profitability and moving forward. But first, I just want to sort of paint a picture for everyone of the impact of the pandemic on your restaurants and how you started seeing things change and what you've done to deal with that.
Well, I guess any person in businesses, is going to be looking at your revenue pretty regularly. So, because it's the lifeblood of any business, cash is king. It always has been king, and it always will be. It's basic mathematics. Incremental revenue into your businesses leads to incremental growth to your bottom line, and if it goes the other way, it goes the other way. So I'm sort of like looking at figures and trends and stuff all the time, as well as being, completely focused on our product, because our product's, got to be, that's our first concern always. But you're looking at revenue, and I guess you're hearing the noise about what's going on. We've got close associations with Italy, so we were getting feedback from Italy that this was way bigger than what everyone thinks. I had mates that live in Italy, Italians and Australians, telling me that, hey, this is, just a bad flu and it's only going to impact elderly people. And then within a week or two of sending me podcasts, Italian podcasts, saying this is very different to what we all thought, and we probably all underestimated this. So with that backdrop, we're listening, we're watching what's going on, because I'm thinking, it comes here, what's the impact's going to be on us, on our revenue? So it was clear where we're positioned. We're very, very heavily oriented to the corporate community. We are a corporate restaurant, whether we like it or we don't. Tourism's significant, but the biggest thing for us is really about business in the CBD. And so what happens in the corporate sector really has an impact on our businesses. And in order to effectively and to run them in a compliant way, you've really got to be across your labour management. It's the most important thing in our industry. And so you just want to know where the revenue figures were going. And I was starting to hear, it was really interesting, the week before the massive decline happened, and it happened really quickly. It was we went off the edge of a cliff in a space of about 3 days. So, but in the first week, we were on par with the previous year's sales, and but what I noticed was the corporate spend. We're hearing that, Ernst & Young were looking at trialling the whole of their staff of working from home to see if their IT systems were going to deal with it. We're hearing all this kind of stuff from different corporate organisations in the city, our client base. So, and it was really interesting. The government, I think, probably knew more than they were saying. The corporate sector absolutely was across this way before anybody else, definitely the general public. So on the Friday lunch, I don't think we had 18 people booked in one restaurant and about 15 in the other, which is just, Friday lunch is normally a peak trading time in restaurants in the CBD. And I knew we could see it was falling away, and there were lots of corporate bookings that were being cancelled. And then Saturday night, ironically, and Friday night were a couple of record nights for us. And Friday and Saturdays, that's when the general public dines with us more than the business community. So it was really clear to me that business was really ahead of the curve on this one, and the general public had no idea what was going on. And then by the following week, we're looking at forward bookings. The following week, we were projecting a decline of about 85% going into the week. So for me, it was just, so we went from the week before, dropped maybe, 5-10% on the previous year on a similar week, to, we could see this, and you have to respond really quickly to this stuff. So you just can't. A lot of people don't understand why people shut businesses early. Well, our estimations is that, the following week it wasn't as quite as bad as we thought it was. I think it was about 2/3 drop, so about a 67-68% drop in revenue in 1 week. And so right from the start of the week, I knew we were shutting down, and I knew, because I just knew that to keep operating with that level of revenue is like you go backwards so quickly. So I can say that we lost just south of $50,000 in 1 week. In that week, so that's a harrowing experience. And then we went into, and this is why people get stood down, because the businesses, if they continue to try and trade and not do that, then they'll be insolvencies just very, very close. So so we then shut it all down. It was before the Prime Minister actually called it. But in the end, we didn't trade out of any time out of the officially called shutdown. And I called it on Friday, Thursday, Friday, and then by Sunday night, the Prime Minister had made the call to shut all restaurants down except for takeaway. The following week, our estimate's probably about 26K, across the two restaurants in loss. So you managed to quell it, but that was before JobKeeper. And so these figures are, these are figures that not many businesses can go backwards at that rate for very long. So, and we definitely can't. So, so then it was just, by the following week, we'd really, JobKeeper was going to be back paid that week. So that made a massive difference. I mean, JobKeeper's ugly in many ways, but it's, I've got to say, any kind of initiative or legislation that's going to be sort of rolled out that quickly, it's always going to be ugly. And I think I have to commend the government for what they've done. There are big problems with it and holes in it, but it really addressed the first major issue that we all have, which is really around staff costs now, but also staff costs in the future, because it also costs you, when you're pivoting, you kind of need a core staff to do that as well. It's not like you just, we're rolling out new businesses in 3 or 4 days, where we would normally take 6 months to work on a new concept or a new initiative.
Absolutely. So moving forward then, as the industry tries to reopen, and, there's all sorts of restrictions in place, 10 people, 20 people, there'll be 100 people, all sorts of distancing. What's the reality of of the landscape and profitability in that period?
Our analysis would tell us, and this is sort of, this is without verifying it against actuals, but our analysis would tell us that you kind of hit break even, our businesses hit break even at around, the 70-75% of revenue mark. So what it says is you need high levels of revenue to be breaking even. Otherwise, you're going backwards. Now, JobKeeper helps that. Without that, and if the industry's doing 30-40% less revenue as a whole, the industry as a whole is not making any money. Like, they're going backwards, arguably a lot more. So how long can you go on for? Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think only 30% of businesses in Australia that registered for JobKeeper actually went through with it. And the main reason that didn't happen is because of cash flow concerns. They couldn't carry the payments to lead up to the first payment. Now, Josh Frydenberg, and I don't want to be too critical because I think the guys have really moved quickly on this. It's ugly and it's got big holes, but it was pretty awesome what they did. But he's turned around saying, just go to the bank and take the low interest loan, the $250,000 to pay your staff, and so to do that, what Josh didn't tell everybody was that the banks will only do that if you give personal or directors guarantees. So that initiative was really about putting people's houses on the line, so that was probably not an option for a lot of people as well, to be able to give personal guarantees to even get that money. So what that tells me is that there's probably a lot of businesses that are going to have trouble with cash flow. And once JobKeeper goes, it's really dire. And a lot of their position really depends on how their negotiation is going with leases and with their landlords. So what I'm saying is that I don't think most people quite understand the gearing of restaurants and how bad this is, and that this whole sort of like this period of quarantining the insolvency acts, which finishes it in 4.5 months' time. I think the real bloodbath is going to be seen in the next sort of 6 to 12 months. My feeling is, for a lot of the industry, I think the government's really going to need to step in and do something. Otherwise, there's going to be some real problems. I mean, it ends up getting reflected in unemployment levels, but it's really, really bad. And I think on the way out of this, the restaurant industry needs stimulation like we've never seen before, because this is akin to a great, the impacts of a Great Depression. And I guess the big concern is about what's going to happen here. Like, without JobKeeper, I'd say the vast majority of restaurants in Australia are trading insolvent as we speak, unless they really were able to pivot to takeaway, or were already heavily exposed to takeaway. And that's going to play out, it's got the potential to play out in a really ugly way.
So you were just talking about restaurants needing stimulation. What can the government do to help further?
I mean, I saw a circular going the other day. I think it was a restaurant and catering. I think it might have been an article, and they're talking about potentially for a period or indefinitely winding back fringe benefits tax on restaurant spends from businesses. So make restaurant spend tax deductible. This was sort of floating around my head before I read it, and it was sort of like, because I was thinking, it's the kind of injection that the industry needs. If business can do their corporate entertaining and have it tax deductible, then I think there's no doubt it's going to lead to business coming back more quickly, a lot more quickly, and spending a lot more. Another idea that was floated was to remove GST on all food. So all restaurant food as well would remove GST. That's like that's a 10% kicker straight away. That'd be huge. Maintain pricing at the pre-COVID levels and get that. So they're two really brilliant initiatives.
What else have you done to help get through this pandemic?
No, so we've rolled out, an online. We had an online wine business, with a very bespoke wine procurement program particularly in Italy, but also in Champagne and in some New Zealand producers and in Australia. So for us, we already had an online line. We really went out hard on that, and that really surprised us. That's really good. We've launched a range of, sort of handmade pastas as well, which has been another thing that's been really well received. That's still really small change from where we need to be. We're going to go out with the delivery, and we're also going to we're actually going to open Pendolino with a 10 person. It sounds completely ludicrous to most people in the industry, and it's ludicrous to me too. But I guess if you can peg back 20% here, 10% there, 15% there, particularly under JobKeeper, you get to that point where you can break even. Then you're probably in a pretty good position, relatively speaking.
Can you tell us how you're going to handle opening Pendolino with 10 people?
With 10 people, we were modelling it up today in the restaurant, and it's like, because it's 10 and then it's 20, right? And then because of the 4 metre rule, for us it'll go up to about 55 covers.
What sort of menu are you going to do?
Well, the only way you can really do this is, only way we can do this. And, I was a little bit like, you kind of have to process this information, and you go through the full gamut of, emotions when you hear new releases on what's going on. The first thing was like, what effing planet are these people on? But you kind of got to understand, once again, it's a one-size-fits-all scenario, and they're really trying to open up cafes. This is really about cafes where people can go and sit, have a coffee, have something quick, and get in and get out, and then you can have 10 people. It's kind of an extension of the lines of 10 people, that sort of the hang-off of coffee machines at the moment all over Australia, probably the world. So when you understand that this initiative is not really, about restaurants, and it's about the government slowly opening it up, allowing a bit more, because kind of everyone's standing in groups of 10 anyway at coffee shops at the moment. Allowing a bit more, taking the foot off the brake for 2 weeks or 3 weeks to see how that goes before they go to the next phase. And so I guess from a restaurateur's perspective, it's a load of complete and utter bollocks. From a health perspective, it makes more sense when you look at it from that side. And it's just a quantum change for us to wrap our heads around this, because it's, and I'm a bit like, when people tell us to make lemonade out of lemons, you just feel like smashing them in the face, to be honest. But it's like, I guess you just don't understand it unless you've been running these kind of restaurants, at all and for a long time. But
how did you get into the industry, and, why do you love restaurants so much?
Yeah, well, I think it just kind of, I think this industry kind of picks you more than you pick it. You really you're really passionate about, the whole dining experience of produce. I grew up in a family that was, I used to beg my father to go to the shop and buy food rather than grow everything ourselves. We act like normal families and buy food from the supermarket. I didn't realise at the time that was sort of that was like a preparation for a career later for me. That such close proximity to produce, and Dad grew everything. Like going into COVID, he had like 2 freezers full of his own beef that had been processed. He was preparing for COVID-19 for about 50 years. He wasn't planning on changing his diet or his habits for the next 12 months, and he doesn't need to leave his home, he reckons. So that's funny. But we all get into it. We kind of, there's a lot of, I wouldn't call myself like the chefs, you sort of, I don't know, it kind of chooses you. You really, really fall in love with creating beautiful things from things that come out of the earth or grow on the earth or in the water, and that whole process of transformation, and then presenting it in a different format to people is something that you kind of you fall in love with, and it chooses you. And I think, so for a lot of, it's just really a really difficult thing. These ideas about serving food on plastic plates or paper plates and using plastic cutlery, it's it's kind of, it's kind of difficult for people to wrap their heads around. I don't think we need to do that. And we're going with it because we just think that we what we've done is we've gone, well, we're really going to take Pendolino. We're not going to open La Rosa to start with, but we feel that we're going to, with 10, we're almost going to look at it like it's a pop-up version of its own restaurant in its own space. But we're going to do a tasting menu, and so it's going to be tasting only, basically a degustation menu for 10 people, and we'll have 2 sittings at night, probably starting at 6 o'clock and the second one at 8:15, and we'll start with Friday lunch, and Saturday we'll probably do 2 lunch services and 2 dinner services. I think it's really good if it's successful if sort of like stage 1, 2, and 3 of this are actually successful, which I've got big question marks around because I'm really concerned that it's gonna mushroom out again because it seems so contagious, this virus. But if it does, I think it's really important to really start to get the core of what we do, even if it's a smaller version of it, happening. And I think we can't really do 10. We can't really do 10 places in a restaurant on the same pricing model. So we're going, you know what? It's a really rare time in history. We're going to turn this into a Pendolino that we've never seen before, and because we kind of don't have any other choice, and we're going to do that and give that a shot. So it's kind of been the direction of the restaurant for many years now anyway. So we're trying to look at it as, and then have it in amongst a range of other sort of revenue generating streams that we've got going at the moment. So that's, we're not going to turn over what we did before on this model, but if it's incremental then and it helps, the guys are quite excited about it in a strange way, and which is really, really good. I mean, the other thing that we're not really talking about much is all these temporary visa guys that we really run our restaurants on across Australia. And it needs to be said that there's 2.3 million of them in Australia. So more or less, you're talking 10% of the Australian economy, right? 10% of the people in the Australian economy. So 50% of them are just told to go back to their country, and they go back to their country. There's your recession right there, right? So that's just a numbers recession. But I don't think, even if an appropriate treatment was found next week or tomorrow, and you could roll it out and because, hey, it's safe again, just take these pills and you'll be fine. I just don't think we could ramp it all back up and go back up to, it's questionable as to whether most people could do 70, 80% of the revenue on the staff at the moment, because they're just not there. Like the temporary visa workers is a big, big issue for certain industries, particularly hospitality in Australia. I mean, that's just a reality.
Where do you see your business, Pendolino and La Rosa, in 6 to 12 months, realistically?
I think it's really tricky. Like, a lot of it depends on JobKeeper, I reckon. And I know there's talk of sort of winding elements of it back, but for our industry, it needs to be continued a lot further, really, to get beyond this. And the second thing is really how does this all play out with landlords? That's another big factor. The third one, which is probably the first one really, is what does this disease look like in a month's time, in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time? I mean, these are quite harrowing thoughts, really, because I'll pose the question: what are restaurants? What does retail look like if inappropriate treatment isn't found quickly, and if it looks like it's mutating? Because that's really, if a treatment's found, and then or a vaccine, and the vaccine looks like it'll probably take longer with no guarantee, then I think it's a sort of slow crawl out of a hole. That's what I think it is, and I think everybody's really looking at alternative revenue streams really to make it.
What do you think the positives are to come out of opening up, like you are with Pendolino and what many restaurants may be doing at this time as well, slowly opening up. What's going to be some of the positives moving forward?
There's been an enormous amount of positives come out of this, which is really strange. I mean, I haven't sort of gone home and the neighbourhood be really, really quiet since I was living in Bunbury about 40 years ago, right? So it was just a bizarre thing for me to go home. And I think in a strange way, it was actually nice to be, my wife and my son are happy to have me cooking for them every night, which is different. That's been really pleasurable, actually. It's a strange thing to say, but it has. I think there's been an enormous willingness for people to do things that they otherwise wouldn't have been willing to do, which has been really interesting. It's almost like being, it's kind of like doing, doing business in a different way. So you've got lots of minimum quantities of thing or maximum quantities. There's been such a willingness to people to do new things. Like we had a line of a retail pasta line pegged right from and sauces and stuff pegged from sort of 13 years ago when we were launching Pendolino, when we never really got to do it because we were just too busy running restaurants. But then we did it, and it was like there's been an enormous amount of satisfaction in that. We converted a cool room to an industrial scale dryer to make dried pasta.
Well, as we start to take the baby steps to see what that new world is with the restaurants being allowed to open up and the unimaginable 10-seated Pendolino opens, how are you going to feel opening the doors for the first time and doing this sort of pop-up in your own restaurant? How's it going to feel?
It's funny because the whole concept of doing 10 seats is just this like not something any of us would really are happy about. But I woke up this morning and I said to my wife, to Priscilla, I said, I feel really happy. I do feel happy, and I can't really explain it because life's pretty depressing at the moment for anyone in restaurants. Like you wake up and it's not a great space because you just don't know whether you don't know whether you're going to be viable in 3 months' time or 6 months' time or 12 months' time. So and I woke up and I said I feel really good, and she just looked at me. She goes, "You're opening you're opening up one of the restaurants, so you're obviously really happy about that." And I think, I intellectually, mentally, I would say that I don't feel any different about it, but I think emotionally I actually do. I feel like I don't know. There's an excitement that we're actually going to do that because it's something that you work at your craft over a long period of time of doing, and then there's all these people that send you all these emails that I can't read them because it's just too difficult to read them. When people send you emails, explaining to you in great detail how the care and attention and the experiences I've had for key milestones in their lives and stuff, how you've been such an integral part of their lives, and it's kind of it's because I think subconsciously everyone can just talk like I'm talking now about this, and you go into a survival mode and you do all that, but it does there is a deep-seated impact on everybody, and I think you don't really. It sort of creeps up on you every now and again, comes out. You feel very deep emotions sort of out of nowhere. And because I think, in a way, I think everyone in our industry is, sort of going through trauma. We're actually dealing with trauma to a degree. And there's a big sense of not knowing there. It's really, I don't think anyone can really predict too much because I just don't think we know. So I think, notwithstanding that background, kind of sort of doom and gloom background, it's we're looking forward to doing it. We're also looking forward to rolling out the delivery. Takeaway is hard for us. We're at the top of the Strand Arcade in the middle of Sydney, so it's not an easy place to get to. So, and once again, that's a little bit different. That's sort of like hits of both restaurants into a sort of a Pendolino group takeaway service. we surveyed our database. We've got a pretty big database, sort of just south of 20,000 people, and they've all eaten in the restaurant, so we know that they know our brands and what we do. And we surveyed them, and a lot of people really wanted the food at home, or a takeaway version of it. Of course, takeaways, everyone's sort of like having to change the way they do things for a takeaway or a pickup or a delivery service. So that's different again, but that's quite exciting in the sense that we're doing new initiatives, and people are working closely together as well. With all the team, everyone's really kind of focused on getting a positive result, and it's everybody's kind of suffering. Unless you're a part-time worker that used to work 5 hours a week, and now you're earning $750, which is probably more rare cases than common. Everyone's taken a hit with this, and in our industry, and so you can't really blame anybody or each other. It's just it's completely out of our control.
Well, mate, you've got a big period coming up here with opening your new restaurant, or the version of. Listen, really appreciate your time and your thoughts. Keep in touch, and very much looking forward to seeing what the new Pendolino looks like and what happens moving forward. And we really appreciate you giving us your time.
Great talking to you as well. Always, mate. And look forward to chatting again soon.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.